Guys, I'm Dr. Steph, and today I'll be talking about getting into medicine as a first-gen low-income student. So this is a re-recording of the talk I did for the medical mentor community. And when I was applying to medical school, I was a first-gen low-income student. Right now, I am a staff physician. And when I first applied, there actually were no talks like this of any sort at all. So it was a lot of black box, the application process. And even now, I don't actually think there are talks like this either. So I just wanted to do this talk for you guys and have it recorded so that it can help as many people as possible. And so having helped create the diversity mentorship program at U of T, when the medical mentor community approached me for this talk, I was actually really happy to see that there were other mentorship groups that were popping up and to be able to speak with their mentees. And so I think mentorship is really important, especially for equity-seeking students who are interested in medicine. That's why I really wanted to promote their website and their community as a resource for the audience here. So for those who don't know me, I currently give the personal finance lectures for the medical students at U of T. I'm also on the financial aid committee, and I was a file reviewer and interviewer for med school and residency for a few years. I also blog about personal finance as well as any sort of social issues related to economic inequities on Instagram, Breaking Bad Debt. And finally, I also do hospital-based addictions medicine and community medicine, community family med as my day job. So what are we going to talk about today? So the first thing is I wanted to explore why medicine. Before you even apply to medicine or decide you want to be a doctor, you have to have your why medicine. You have to have that value and know what is your why and why are you doing this. The second thing I wanted to talk about is, give you 5 tips for affording the medical school application process. These are kind of like the hidden curriculum, the tips that people don't really tell you, because as a low-income student, you kind of have to find some creative ways to kind of get the same results as someone who may not be in the same situation as you. And just so you're aware, the Q&A will not be uploaded due to having a safe space to ask questions. However, if you do have any questions for me at all about medical school applications and things like that, feel free to leave it in the comments. So I think the first part of the journey towards becoming a doctor is just knowing why medicine. If you have a vision and you kind of know what your end goal is, how you can contribute to the medical field, whether it be through your life experiences, your educational skills, interests, having that as your core goal rather than just having the goal of just getting in is what will make your application successful. So it's always important to, have something you're passionate about or value greater than simply striving to get in, because that will actually make you succeed beyond getting in. So in this section, I'm going to be telling you my why of how I became a doctor and why I became a doctor. So like many immigrants who came to Canada seeking a better life, my parents actually came to Canada first with 3 suitcases to settle down here. And then 1 year later, I came by myself to join them in Canada. And at that time, they had settled down in a subsidized housing neighborhood close to Chinatown in Toronto. And so this is kind of the neighborhood where I grew up in. And the reason why they chose that area is because it's tough enough as it is to not have any jobs or income, but then to not speak English on top of that was really tough. So that's why they chose to live in this area, because it helped with the language barrier a bit more. So when I arrived, I actually had a hard time adjusting to this housing because of the mold, the insects, the rodents. It caused me to have a lot of respiratory issues, and then I was in the ER a lot and hospitalized a lot for that. And then even at school, I struggled too because there was a lot of bullying and not being able to defend myself due to a language barrier. So this was a picture of my class, and as you can see, it's pretty diverse. However, not being able to speak English was pretty tough as well. And so, when I was at school, teachers actually automatically assumed I had a learning disability because I didn't respond back. So they automatically assumed that I was slow, and then I was placed in special education classes. When my parents found out that I was attending like not the class that the rest of the students were in, they kind of realized what had happened, and then that's when they realized, maybe we have to move to a better neighborhood. And so we actually kept moving and moving, and I changed schools 4 times in 6 years. The other reason why I had to change school so much was just also due to job scarcity for my parents as well. And so it wasn't until my family and another immigrant family kind of got together and we rented a 1+1 bedroom apartment as two families living under one roof. It's probably not allowed based on the rental contract, but it's what we had to do in order to move to a better neighborhood. And so that's why I wanted to post this study over here, just because it shows how, when kids are moved to a better neighborhood, it does improve their economic and health outcomes. And so although my parents had never heard of the study before, it wasn't even published when they were trying to move me to a better neighborhood, they kind of got that sense of what was going on. And so I kind of became the hidden low income student in the school of more middle class and upper class kids. And many of their parents were actually, doctors, dentists, lawyers, business people. And so with the change in the neighborhood and with the housing, my health actually started improving much more. I wasn't getting respiratory issues, and then my grades also started improving because I wasn't always in the hospital all the time. And that also helped me realize that, seeing these kids' parents and the kind of houses they lived in when I went to their place to do group projects, that's when I realized, education is the way out. And so for my parents, neither of them have university educations. And then as a result of that, I actually saw them getting fired very frequently, having to endure, quite frankly, workplace harassment. They were often like told things like, you're replaceable. There are a lot of folks with degrees who can take your job. Often people will say to them, can I just get someone who can speak English? Because they worked in fast food industry quite a lot. Being called, dumb, uneducated, how do you not know this? Or even like sometimes racist things like, go back to your own country. And so it took me seeing my mom getting fired like 10 times. And then one time I saw her cry because we couldn't afford this course that she actually needed to, to work. And then seeing her fired the next week expectedly for, not having done the course, this actually made me take my education really seriously at a young age. So I studied really hard while balancing part-time jobs delivering newspapers since the age of 13. And so over the summers, while I was working, I kind of borrowed the textbooks from the grade above me from the public library, and I tried to teach myself the content I needed to learn the next year. And as a result, my grades were pretty high, but I actually never thought about medicine as a career choice, simply because I just didn't know what it was. I didn't really know anyone who pursued it or even where to start. So my life plan was actually to be a secretary because my mom had told me, secretarial work was very stable. You get to work closely with the boss, so you never really got fired, and you can dress nicely, and you get married early. So when everyone was talking about course selection, university plans, like what everyone does in high school, I thought I would become a secretary, and then maybe I would get promoted to being a bookkeeper, and then maybe even become an accountant in the future. And I soon came to realize that those plans of mine were vastly different from like my classmates' plans of being a doctor, lawyer, or CEO. And our school had a co-op program, so a lot of these people with those kind of aspirations were already doing placements at law firms or volunteering in hospitals. So because I had high grades, people in the class kind of knew me and they asked me a lot for help and tutoring. So I was actually tutoring a lot of these well-off kids after school and for free. I was helping them achieve their goals of being a doctor, a lawyer, or a CEO. And it made me realize, why am I helping these well-off kids get to their dream jobs? Why can't I have that for myself? So while I was tutoring these kids and editing their essays, I kind of saw what university programs that they were applying to, which scholarships they were going for. And, I figured if I had higher grades, and I also had a lot of volunteer experience just from tutoring these kids, maybe I might have a chance of getting in with a scholarship. And so that's when I kind of like entered the game. So I settled on medicine because all of those careers that these other kids aspire to have, medicine was kind of the only one a low income kid like me had any contact with, given how often I was hospitalized. I was in the emerge as a kid. And so unlike richer classmates who interacted with doctors, lawyers, or CEO parents, I had no clue what any of those fields were. And in fact, there was no way that my family could ever cross paths with lawyers or CEOs But doctors, they were different. They helped low income folks like me. And that's why I wanted to post this picture because it shows how people who are on the lowest end of the income spectrum are those who ended up hospitalized the most and intersecting with the hospital system the most. And that was very similar to my case. And so, after deciding on being a doctor, I kind of faced a second barrier that I think a lot of low income first gen students faced. So I actually got into undergrad at Queens and I chose that school simply because they provided me with the most scholarship money. That was pretty much it. I didn't really know anything about Queens, to be honest. And so at that time, it was the first time I met private school kids. I had never met a private school kid in my life at all. And it kind of made me realize the huge gap between the social capital they had as well as the economic capital across students. And a lot of these private school students had these like networking events, even at my undergrad, with alumni attending who were at the same school all together. And so, they were able to network with these alumni or these older students who are kind of already established in what career path they wanted to take. And so, for myself, really not knowing what some of these private schools were, I kind of just Googled them. And I also realized there was quite a lot of, I guess, racial difference between people who came from private school and those who didn't. And as someone who tried to make friends, it was really hard to enter these circles and be friends with these folks. And so for some of you guys who may have watched my video, Affording Medical School, I talk a little bit more about how to deal with the financial situation once you're already in. And I only touch a very small amount about, the breakdown cost. So I put in the description for that particular video, the breakdown of how much it costs to apply. And on general, about 2,241 is kind of the lower limit of applying to one school in Ontario, taking into account travel fees and upper limit of how much it can cost. But I didn't really touch on, affording the process of applying. So in this particular talk, I'll be giving you some, hidden curriculum tips on, how I managed to pay for the application process and how I also managed to get the network needed and how I found my mentors when I was applying for medicine as a pre-med. So my first tip for you is, when you are applying for part-time jobs, treat it as a job pitch rather than as a job application. Other than like government loans and entrance scholarships and those kind of things, part-time jobs were probably my second or third biggest source of funding for my tuition and for all of my schooling expenses. So that's why like I treated part-time job as a really important thing for me. And for most students, they will like email blast 20 plus research supervisors. And that's actually what I started doing at first. But I would get like zero responses and no interest at all. So I was like, darn it, how do I even get a part-time job at the school like for the summer? And a lot of times I heard that it was like interesting if you did some sort of research in the summer. It was good to get these reference letters from research supervisors. So I was specifically trying to apply for a research job instead of working fast food again. So, you know, this was a big hurdle to get through. And now that I'm on the other side, kind of as a supervisor myself, I started to realize, what the difference between a quality, pitch or a job application is compared to a not good one. So for example, let's say if you look at this particular example, it says, Dear Dr. Steph, I'm a second year student from U of T who heard about your work in financial literacy. This is also an interest of mine, and I was wondering if there are any opportunities for me to get involved on a project this summer. And so these are the kind of generic letters that often get dismissed or thrown out by research supervisors. So why might supervisors not reply? Well, I mentioned that it was generic, but it kind of has to be generic if you're going to email blast all these supervisors. But also from a research supervisor's perspective, you don't like when you try to hire a student or you bring in a student, it creates a lot of extra work for me because I have to think about, okay, what project is available that I can give this student, not knowing what their skills are or how they can add value to my lab. And secondly, I also have to find out how I can apply for funding for the student to pay them in the summer too. So from just this one email, it creates two additional pieces of work that I have to do with no guarantees of whether the student might actually produce a research paper or not, right? So, that's why I might want to not answer this email. So what I would rather you to do instead of just applying and competing against all these other people who are sending these generic emails is to do something like what this student is doing. So this student says, Dear Dr. Steph, I am a second year student from your Financial Literacy 201 class. After attending this class, I learned to be more proactive about my own finances and started educating my family about personal finance. I have a long-standing interest in education with experience as a TA, and as an international student, I'm interested in developing a resource for international students to be more aware of scholarships. I'm seeking out a supervisor to mentor and support me on a project of this nature, and I'm willing to work on grant applications to fund this project and hope to produce a valuable resource for students by end of the summer. I have attached my CV and transcript for your reference. So what is attractive about this particular job application or letter? So the first thing is, this student introduces themselves and kind of gives a bit more context on how they were able to find me instead of just looking at the department website and just emailing every single person on there. Secondly, they also talk about previous experience and what something that they can contribute. They have teaching experience. They talk about developing a resource. Now, this was a project that I would have never thought of doing myself, but if this student thought of it themselves and, it introduced it to me, and I was like, oh, wow, that's actually a really good idea. They are pitching rather than trying to apply for some sort of non-existent job that might be in my lab, for example. So, they come up with their own project idea, which is actually really makes them stand out. And the other thing is they're also willing to work on grant applications. Some students who will also have a variant will say like, I already come self-funded, for instance. So they already have some sort of summer grant or something like that, that a lot of research supervisors are very happy to see. And but if you don't come with your own grant funding, for example, being able to show a willingness to work on it and to help with it, that can be a really good thing as well. And finally, they also say that they have attached their CV, because I guess the third piece of work that a research supervisor has to do is if your CV is not attached to your original generic email, then I have to put in the work of emailing you back and saying, can you send a CV? Can you send a transcript? Just so I can kind of know you better. Otherwise, I don't even know who you are. So this is a sample letter, for example, just to kind of show, how to write a good, job proposal. And some students will be like, okay, so then how can I be self-funded if being self-funded is something that looks really attractive to a summer job supervisor? So there's two main ways I'm going to talk about. The first is work-study programs, which is I've kind of shown the screenshots from the U of T work-study program, and also thesis year. So work-study is something that you can kind of create your own, or you can find it on the database. And for myself, I kind of created my own, and I was able to approach different supervisors saying that I have work-study grant, and I can use it to self-fund myself to work on some sort of project. And I got like immediate responses every time. Thesis year, so a lot of pre-meds come to me saying like they can't really find research experiences, they can't really find clinical experiences. And so if you have the opportunity to do a thesis year, either in your fourth year of undergrad, it's kind of like a good opportunity for you to bring that up with a potential supervisor you want to work with, because there's a higher guarantee of, you producing something from that particular project. So just three things I really want you guys to remember that they don't really teach you, especially not low-income students. So number one, we always talk about competing in pre-med, and I don't think that's a great environment to have at all. Instead of saying that you're competing all for a seat at the table for a job, it's important to think of ways that you can create your own job. How can you add value to an existing job position, to a certain supervisor you want to work with? So create over compete. The second thing is, supervisors are always super busy, and it's important to ask yourself, what can I do to help the supervisor save time? provide as much info about yourself in one of those job proposal emails, job pitches, and think about how you can add value to that particular job, how you can, create something unique that will help the supervisor. And lastly, close the loop. This is a very important one because a lot of students who do these research positions, let's say they end up getting to med school and they just drop the position, which looks really unprofessional. And otherwise, some students will take on these jobs or summer research jobs, and they don't end up producing anything from it. They either don't produce a presentation, they don't produce a poster or a paper out of it, and they kind of just drop the project as soon as they start school, and then they just leave it for either like a grad student or somebody else to do. And so they actually just creating more work on the way out. But I found that people who, close the loop, they try to like deliver, produce a deliverable, that looks really good for not only the supervisor, but for that student. It is the one thing that will help you increase your network because supervisors will then introduce you to other supervisors to work with as well. It will also increase your net worth because you'll be able to be introduced to all of these other job opportunities, research opportunities that are paid as well. My second tip for you as well is the MCAT prep courses and fee assistance programs. So this was another financial barrier I faced because MCAT is expensive. And back in my day, programs like this didn't exist. So now they do, and they help mitigate the costs of the MCAT. So I basically just did a quick Google search. I started with A, which is Alberta, and I noticed that they had a free MCAT course over 3 months, and these are taught by medical students. And at U of T, they also have one as well. So it's really important to look within your own university to see if they have some sort of these like MCAT prep courses. The other really good one I recommend to students is the Khan Academy MCAT course, and it's super detailed. It comes with quiz questions. However, keep in mind, this course will be retired on September 21st, 2021. So if you're watching this pre-September, better get on it, download and screenshot as many things as you can, because I actually think this is a pretty detailed resource and it's free. And finally, there are also MCAT fee assistance programs created by the AAMC. And this didn't exist prior to 2019, but now it does. So it's important that you take advantage of it because when it first came out, a lot of students actually didn't apply and they had a lot of empty spots. And what's good about this program is it helps discount your otherwise very expensive MCAT exam. And they also provide you with like free prep resources as well as stipends if you do need accommodation of up to $800 to support your MCAT, for instance. So definitely do check it out. I've linked it in the slides. So my third tip for you is to build your network through going to pre-med clubs, mentoring programs, and conferences. Back when I was a med student, only pre-med clubs existed and mentorship programs didn't really exist, but now they do. And so it's really important that you take advantage of it because not only is getting funding important, building your network is just as important when you want to ask students about the application process and when you want people to help you with your reference letters. So I always encourage you to start with mentorship programs within your own school. And so, for instance, I'm from U of T, and so that's why the community of support is something I'm very familiar with. And I often promote it for students who are looking for mentorship going into medicine. There's also a new student group coming out of U of T as well called Price of a Dream. So I just wanted to, give them a shout out as well because I think they're also trying to focus on students who come from low income backgrounds too. The Black Medical Students Program, Students Association, has also created the Unofficial Guide to Canadian Medical School. And it's a very detailed guide. It's something that I think you can easily read through. It's very well organized, and it is written by medical students. And I think especially when you're trying to find these kind of free resources out there weren't that many, but now I think more and more they are starting to pop up. And looking outside of your school, looking at cross-Canada resources, there's also the MedX conference. So this is another really good conference that's in almost every major university town or city. And so it's a good opportunity for you to kind of learn about the medical school application process And for those of you who are low income and can't pay for the conference fees, they also have like these grants to cover the entire fee for you. So definitely check it out. And I think it's really important to try to get the emails of the medical students there so that you can kind of follow up with them and ask them after the conference about specific questions you might have. And also just remember to close the loop. Often when I find students go to these conferences and I speak at them, they might just like sit in and listen to me talk, but then afterwards they don't really ask questions or they don't come up to me and ask anything. But some of the more successful students that I've later mentored actually asked me for my email and kind of got in contact with me after the fact. And for those of you who are in high school, Project Pulse is another good resource for students who are interested in STEM, including medicine. Especially since there's not a lot of conferences that kind of promote the medical field or any sort of scientific field research and things like that, this is an example that I wanted to showcase in my slides too. My fourth financial tip is to use a cashback or travel points credit card. Often when I was a student, I was really hesitant about trying to accumulate using a credit card because I was worried about credit card debt and things like that. But then I started realizing that there were a lot of credit cards that offered these travel points, and I was actually able to get a few flights for free when I was interviewing for medical school. So what are credit card hacks? Basically just getting a cashback credit card or even a travel points credit card, because when you're applying for medical schools, you'll be using your credit card a lot. Some of these cards, for example, have 10% cashback promos, and they often have, like, if you spend $2,000, which is basically how much you're going to spend anyways on your med school application, that is like a $200 discount on your application. So any amount helps, any little bit helps. And I try not to promote any like products or financial products in my slides due to the conflicts of interest. So what I would suggest that I did is I kind of just Googled, top travel credit cards or best cashback credit cards and kind of like looked through those. And I enrolled in one as a student and used that for a lot of these expensive application costs. The key point is just remember to pay off your credit card balance because you don't want to be in even more debt. And my final tip is, it's important to spend a few hours on those forums, those med school websites and Facebook groups, because I know that there are a lot of students will spend thousands, maybe even tens of thousands on med school consulting companies. But as someone who has been on the, other side of the interview table and as a file reviewer myself, it's really important to just question these companies and ask them, how are you recruiting your students? How are you training your students? Because if the only criteria for them to accept a medical student to work for them is the fact that they're a medical student, like I think medical students have very broad acceptances. Some only got accepted to one school, some got accepted to many schools, and it's really subjective. A lot of the times, first and second year med students haven't been on the file review side or the interview side. So for these students to be giving you advice on interviews, having not been an interviewer or having not been a file reviewer, like I wonder if that might be a little questionable. So I never did any of these med consulting companies, but I do know some of my classmates who work for them. But I personally never approached any of these companies myself. So when it comes to finding out information, other than going to these companies, you can go to each of the school's admission pages. And just like at U of T, for instance, we've had these admission pages where we kind of have these seminars. People who are actually involved in the admission process will be answering student questions, giving advice about the admissions process. And that's probably the number one most accurate resource you can go to. And I think that the other resource that I used a lot was connecting with medical students through Pre-Med 101 and through the Student Doctor Network. Student Doctor Network is more for the States, and Pre-Med 101 is what I used a lot as a med student. And often there's like random strangers on there, but when I was looking for somebody to just practice interviewing with me, I literally just did interview practice with complete strangers, and I think it served me really well just FaceTiming or Skyping with them. Because when you are actually interviewing for med school, you are being interviewed by people you don't know. And so you can find a lot of good resources on these. Just spending a few hours over a weekend going through these forums, going through your researching your schools will serve you way better in terms of your knowledge about the school when you're interviewing compared to just having somebody from a consulting company or something just explaining it to you. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out if it's a personal question on any of my Instagram, Twitter, or on YouTube as a comment, and I'm happy to reply you there. That way other students can see the question you ask, and it would help them as well. So if you want to be informed of any of my future lectures or future talks as a recording, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.